Hi, so my name's Naz. I'm a digital workplace specialist and I focus around device management and mobility.
And I'm Adam from Samsung. I'm the head of business solutions. My job is to help Samsung's customers think about Samsung devices as more than just an endpoint.
So Adam, obviously we're coming to the hopefully the end of the pandemic now. We've learned a lot in the last 18 months in the way people have using devices, how people have used technology, how people have had to adapt to be able to carry on working. From your perspective, what are some of the challenges that you've seen, and what do you think the future holds moving forward from a flexible working perspective?
Yeah, so look, I think what we've learned is that actually there's a lot of businesses in the UK who are still quite a long way behind perhaps they would want to be when it comes to technology. And we saw the kind of the scramble, the rush to buy devices quick, get some devices in for ourselves, for our staff, without really thinking too much about actually how to knit it all together. And so I think the challenge probably for businesses now is, how do we make more of what we bought? How do we make sure what we bought is fit for purpose? And how do we make sure that, all of the systems and the network stuff behind it is actually ready to support this equipment that we've probably, rushed out and bought out of necessity rather than probably planning. And I think that switch now into planning and making the most of that equipment is going to be key.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think I think the way the outlook and the way people are going to work moving forward has probably changed as well. I know O2 has done quite a bit of research on what people view as whether they want to go back to the office, whether they want a mix of both. And you've probably seen the articles that are out there as well. People like Google themselves, who pride themselves on having a community to work from, the campuses that they've invested in, to turn around and say, for them to turn around and say, actually, there is a scenario here where actually everybody doesn't have to come into the office. We need to work differently. Um, some of the challenges that we've seen at O2 is how do we get people up and running quickly, because the solutions that people want to be able to use, the things that people want to be able to do with endpoint technology and devices and digital workplace, it's getting more and more complex. And I think the challenges that we're seeing is where does that complexity lie, right? Because we want to make it easier for the end user. If you make it easier for the end user, they remain engaged, productivity increases, and that's what ultimately helps the business, and it helps keep the employee working. So if we make it easy for the end user, the burden goes to the IT, right? So the complexity's got to go somewhere. And from working with yourselves and working with some of the stuff that you guys can do at Samsung, we've seen that actually you've got a real range of services that you can offer where we can actually take that burden away from both areas, right? So, take a device out of the box, get it working straight away, help configure it remotely, etc. Are you having more conversations around this stuff, and is that something that's going to be really important moving forward from your perspective?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think the truth is no one really knows, like
Hmm.
to the flexible working point. I don't think anyone really knows what the next 6, 12, 18 months are actually going to look like. And so I think the most important thing is to build flexibility in, and to be able to have, the right tools in place so that if it's option A or option B, or a mixture of both, realistically, then you're still equipped, right? It doesn't really matter actually, because you've got the right tools in place. And I think some of the simplest ones and the simplest bits of technology are actually the most effective. Everything you just said there, could be very complicated if you allow it to be, but actually there's a bunch of really easy, uh, you know, technology solutions out there that can make, even for small businesses, even for businesses with no IT department or a very stretched IT department, there's still things there that can be super simple. You were talking about out of the box, and of course with Android devices and Samsung Android devices, you've got a choice of easy enrollment, right? A couple of different solutions there. Knox mobile enrollment, literally makes it you open the box and the device works. You set it up once, and then every device that goes out works perfectly. And I think, thinking about that flexibility, whether your employee is opening that box for the first time inside their office, where you've got IT to help them, or whether they're opening at their house, or for that matter, in a cafe or in the park, that mobile enrollment experience is still exactly the same. It's still
Yeah.
the consistent experience. And that's what we mean by flexibility. It doesn't mean thousands of different solutions. It doesn't mean tons of different options. It just means the right tools in place, to allow your your end user, your employees, to have that same consistent experience.
And I think that's really important as well, because like when we talk about the statistics that have come back around people wanting to be able to work flexibly, that doesn't necessarily always mean I want to work from home or I want to work from the office, right? I want to be able to work from the office, but I want to be able to work from anywhere else. And when we look at being able to work from anywhere else, then actually connectivity is going to be really, really important.
Well, if we go back to the where we started with this was, what do we think employees and businesses are going to expect, and how they're going to want to work in the next 6 to 12 months? I think the one thing we can definitely say is that expectations have been raised. I'm talking personally here. I've been working from home now for the last year, and I certainly don't want to give up some of the benefits that I've been able to enjoy. Even when I start going back into the office, I'm still going to want the option, the flexibility, to be at home one day, whether it's to help, put my kids to bed or, whatever it is, right? My expectations are a lot higher than they were 12 months ago. And I think, having the right solutions in place there to allow me to be either on my Wi-Fi at home or frankly, walking around outside or wherever I choose to be. I think, employees now know, most of them have done a really good job, right? The last 12 months, productivity is higher than it was. And that's down to the individual's effort. But it's also down to the fact that they, can do their jobs, whether they're on a network in the park, on the coffee shop Wi-Fi or at home. And actually they don't care. And we shouldn't impose that on them. And I think a lot of businesses are going to have to stop trying to impose those rules.
When I first started working, IT was quite draconian. It was like, you will have this device, you will work like this is locked down, you can do this and you can't do that. And we've seen a massive paradigm shift, and mobility has been a key part of making that shift. We saw when smartphones first came out, they absolutely battered the BlackBerry device because people wanted to use them. Consumerization drove the way IT had to think. And this pandemic's kind of like the phase 2 of that. It's like, actually, it's helped organizations and it's helped employees within an organization to challenge the norms and actually push boundaries where historically people would have shied away from it, right? If you do, for a lot of people that I've spoken to that have had to work remotely, historically they were like, this would never have happened. We've asked to work remotely and we were never allowed. But this is really, it's pushed the frontier even further now. I think there's been a lot of focus on, I guess, historically, in the world of mobility, certainly in the areas and verticals I've worked in, there's been a lot of focus on the knowledge worker, right? So people like probably me and you who consume a lot of data, be that on a PC, a tablet, or a laptop. But what we have seen, I guess, in the last 18 months is a lot of focus shifting to the frontline worker. And this new, I call it a regeneration of rugged, right? Because ruggeds have been around for a number of years, but all of a sudden now it seems like there's a real focus on some of these rugged devices. And I know you guys have launched a range. I think it's the X-Cover range, which are rugged devices. And I think one of the standout points around that particular thing is that it doesn't look like a rugged device. It could be used as a knowledge worker device and gives you extra protection. What are your thoughts around some of the challenges in the rugged market that you're hoping to address?
I mean, demand, we should start with demand for these devices, firstly, has exploded, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not hard to think why. I don't know about you, but the amount of people that knock on my door every day to deliver something, it was bad pre-pandemic, but now it's an avalanche of delivery drivers, of people out there. Whereas they used to be in a nice, safe environment, they're now out in the field in the literal respect. So I think that's really important because that's driven a huge amount of demand. Taking a step back though, in the past, when you said rugged, what that really meant was either big, bulky, intrinsically safe devices that were ugly, heavy, hard, and designed to survive on oil rigs and in mines and that sort of thing, right? Or consumer handset wrapped in a case, and you just you hoped that it didn't break because you put a fancy case on it. And I think actually the big market there is the bit in the middle, which is, I want a device that isn't consumer. I don't want it to be just wrapped in a case, because that's not rugged enough. And also, it doesn't come with the right features, right? It's still just a consumer device. But equally, I don't want a single-use or super rugged device that I can't use most of the time. And I think, of course, the other thing that's driving the demand for something that's better in the middle, combining those two things, is the fact that so many now of the drivers, of the installers are using their own devices, or at least they get an allowance, they buy their own piece of kit, and they don't want either of those things, right? They want something that's going to last, but equally something that's looks and feels premium. And I guess that was absolutely our approach building Xcover Pro. It's a device that does both. But in the end, that whole range is, built for frontline workers, and there's certain specific features, like it's got programmable keys, and you can use it with gloves. But at the same time, it still runs the most modern version of Android.
Exactly.
Still comes with all the the modern, beautiful screens, cameras, things that you can say consumers, right? Like they're still consumers. Those people now expect those features because they have it at home. So trying to get that balance right is kind of where we've been at for the last couple of years.
Which is great, because I think it offers a real uniqueness. Because like you said, when I think of rugged, I think of these big barcode scanning type devices that you're never going to pull out in a pub or want to be able to use in public, right? So you think the balance is great there, and this is going to make it. Yeah, it is, absolutely is. This is going to make you chuckle, right? Because I think O2 did a survey or did some research, and apparently 56. I'm going to read the statistic, right? 57% of men are more likely to damage their phone in water. I don't know what that means. I don't know why that would happen, but I think having a rugged device is probably going to help in that scenario.
Well,
I mean, statistic.
I don't believe it, but what I do believe is the fact that you need if you're going to give a device, if you're a business and you're going to issue a device to someone in the field, yes, the upfront cost of that device is important, but what's more important is the total cost of ownership, the TCO absolutely. Of that device, over its expected lifespan. And when you were issuing those big, ugly, rugged devices in the past, yes, they might have lasted 7 years in the field in theory, but the world changes so much in 7 years that what you want to be able to do with those devices, changes in that same time period. And so now when we issue a device, a rugged device like the Xcover, we expect it to last in the field, 2, 3, 5 years even sometimes. And it's important, yes, that it survives for that period of time, but it's equally important that it remains smart, because in the end, you're buying it because it's a smart device, not just because it's a phone or because it can do barcode scanning. You want it to do both, and being able to stay modern within that 5-year period, and receive security updates, receive OS updates, remain up to date with what's possible. That's the balance now that all businesses have to try and strike.
Yeah, it was going to be my next talking point, right? Because the hardware is one side of it, but going back to your point, remaining up to date from the software is absolutely key, right? And Samsung have got this great Knox platform, which gives you all the additional security above the standard Android build itself. But I always say, without Android, there is no Knox. Because it's the base layer, right? It starts with Android, and the fact that Samsung are now on board with the Android Enterprise Recommended program is probably a good thing as well, because it's going to help keep these devices up to date, not only to last from a hardware perspective, but from a software perspective. Businesses can look forward to security patching and making sure that these operating systems move with the times. When developers release new applications, it's great because there's a new version of Android from Samsung available for this device, and that life cycle continues. So going back to total cost of ownership, absolutely right. It's great news. So rugged's great, and yeah, absolutely big demand for that, and certainly seeing a lot of that stuff in the frontline worker space. Going back to knowledge workers though, obviously you've got a range of great devices from a knowledge worker perspective, but again, if we talk beyond device itself, they lend themselves to become part of great solutions as well. So there's obviously the Samsung DeX solution. It's not quite a laptop replacement, and it was never intended to be a laptop replacement. What use cases have you seen for that in the last 12 to 18 months, or even before that, and what does it look like for the future?
Well, I mean, long gone are the days where a phone is actually even mainly used for calling people. You'll know this, right? The demands placed on the network nowadays is much more data heavy, right? So you can call people with phones. That's still okay. That still happens. But actually, for the majority of particularly knowledge workers, they use their phone for way more than just calls and text. And that's of course true in the consumer world, is right. You intrinsically know that's true because that's what you use your own phone for at home. And of course for businesses it's no different. So apps and communicating over data with whether it's Teams or Zoom or WhatsApp or any number of different methods, that's the primary use case for a phone. And I think for a long time a phone's computing power, the actual processing power of a phone has long been pretty amazing actually, when you consider where PCs have come from. So you can actually use your phone as a computer if you want to, and plenty of people do that. Samsung DeX has been around for some time, and it was born with that in mind, right? So if I want to use my phone as a PC, and I can do that. And right now, if you've got a modern, a premium Samsung smartphone, you can plug it into a monitor, a mouse and keyboard, and you get a full Windows type experience, right? So you get multi-window, you get drag and drop. You can run Office as though you're on a PC. It is quite amazing, and I think it's probably a bit lazy to say that it's a laptop replacement. I think that's quite old-fashioned thinking. And again, laptops are here to stay. Plenty of people still have laptops. It's back to that thing about flexibility now. So if I want to be able to give my employees the flexibility to still have access to all of their their documents, their ways of working, particularly I think if you're an Office 365 user, everything's in the cloud anyway, and having the flexibility then to use DeX on a phone if you're out and about, or you don't want to have your laptop with you, or you've in fact, when you go back to an office and you don't have loads of fixed terminals anymore, then you can walk back in with your phone. And actually the places where we've seen it work really well is places like the police are doing some really interesting trials at the moment. So they're a kind of interesting combination actually of field worker and knowledge worker, right? So they go out, they're in the field, they need something robust, but at the same time they've got loads of forms to fill in, loads of information then to take from the field and put back into systems. And when you look at how DeX can work, they can take the same device from the field back into an office, plug it into the equipment that's already there that can be shared, so it's a much more effective cost of equipment. And all of that information then can be entered more easily using a proper full-size mouse and keyboard. So I think actually when you blend field and knowledge, that's when DeX really comes into its own.
No, it's an interesting one. I actually saw it in action in San Francisco a couple of years ago. I think one of the police forces there, it was at a conference, and they had it on display. So it was a police car with the Samsung device in a dock, and then they had a screen in there, and they were doing exactly that, right? So using the police secure applications, and it was from a benefits point of view, they were putting the information in once, and then it was just transferred across. And then they weren't having to double up on hardware, and it was just saving time at the end of the shift, right? So they were going in, everything was done within the car itself, and they didn't have to go back into the depot to then manually transfer things in. So security was great, but ultimately it was saving hours for the police force, right? And the police force could concentrate on doing what they needed to do rather than admin work, which is what they should be doing, really.
It's interesting. All of that is only possible because of software, right? We live in an era of software. And that's another great argument for having a device that's smart rather than kind of single fixed use, where you can only really do one thing with it, because who knows what you might want to be able to do with that device in 2 or 3 or 5 years time. I think one of the other really interesting use cases is and one of the really other interesting single use devices to think about replacing is push to talk. And I mean, what I mean by that really is a walkie-talkie, right? And what you can now do with software, push to talk, usually now exceeds the capability of what you can do with, an old radio network and an old, fixed device.
Yeah, of course, and obviously your devices come with pre-programmable push to talk features in there as well.
Yeah, so the Xcover devices themselves have programmable keys on the side, so you can set that to do whatever you want, right? You turn a torch on or launch an app or do something bespoke. One of the most interesting things we've been doing recently, and I know you guys have been heavily involved actually, is with Microsoft Teams walkie-talkie, and now you can really easily deploy that solution using an Xcover Pro.
Yeah,
or
no,
an external
absolutely.
device
Yeah.
with a key on the side.
No, that's great. Yeah, so from an O2 perspective, we've been working on what we call O2 Voice for Teams. So it's basically our unique offering in terms of we can provide the team solution, but provide direct route calling. So Teams is great, and we can make a peer-to-peer call. Most organizations can make a nice peer-to-peer call within an organization. It gets a bit complicated if you want to dial outwards. And that involves all the hardware associated with running PBX systems and all the complications that go with that. So where O2 provide their uniqueness is actually we'll take the pain out of managing a PBX and we'll host our own session broker in our cloud. So a customer could essentially just link in their Teams environment to our hosted PBX, if you like, and make those direct routed calls. And we provide a great billing mechanism, which is something based on like a channel per month. So a channel will have X amount of concurrent calls and you pay for it on a monthly basis. So again, it's making it simpler for organizations to accommodate this technology. The hardware is one side of it, but going back to your point, remaining up to date from the software is absolutely key, right? And Samsung have got this great Knox platform, which gives you all the additional security above the standard Android build itself. But I always say without Android, there is no Knox, because it's the base layer, right? It starts with Android, and the fact that Samsung are now on board with the Android Enterprise Recommended program is probably a good thing as well, because it's going to help keep these devices up to date, not only to last from a hardware perspective, but from a software perspective. Businesses can look forward to security patching and making sure that these operating systems move with the times. When developers release new applications, it's great because there's a new version of Android from Samsung available for this device, and that life cycle continues. So going back to total cost of ownership, absolutely right. It's great news. I'm thinking small to medium enterprise probably don't have an IT department, so that a lot of people are doing it themselves. And the more simpler that we can make it, the more that we can enable, is only going to help drive some of that innovation forward and hopefully drive productivity and get us bouncing back, right?
Too often the burden has fallen onto the IT guys and girls to fix the problems that have been caused by management, either rushing something out, or by employees acting with impunity. And I think security is still a really important topic, right? And
absolutely,
it would be too easy to become blasé about that, thinking that a phone is just a phone. And of course we know that's not true, right? So a phone is an endpoint into a network, and it's often an endpoint into a network that is abused in a way that a laptop isn't, has stuff put onto it that perhaps is more difficult. So I do feel sorry a little bit for some of the demands on IT, and I think obviously for us, that's why we've spent such a long time refining not just Knox security, which is the kind of the security from the chip up into the built into devices, but also the software layer you were talking about. So we obviously build our own components, we manufacture them into our own devices, but at the same time we also build the same the firmware, the software, and we work closely with Google to make sure that all those layers are secure. And I think even if you are a very small business, you can take advantage, in theory, a lot of that scale of security and some of the solutions that you can get. If you get an enterprise edition device, you get a year's worth of Knox Suite included, right? You get up to 5 years now worth of security updates included, right? So that stuff comes with the device already. And if you're a small business, the reassurance of having those things built in, yes, you have to activate them, right? Yes, you have to make sure that they're up and running. Yes, you have to make sure they're configured with the help of of O2, but you don't have to think you're not on your own, I guess is the message there. And that would be my message out to all the the hard suffering IT departments out there, is that you're not on your own.
No, absolutely. But I think, and I completely agree with the point around security, right? Security absolutely has to have a part to play in this, and a massive part, if anything. But security doesn't have to be prohibitive. The security models and the way mobility has been designed to be used, and you've talked around some really good stuff there. Samsung devices are secured from the hardware layer upwards. You build from the chipset, not just the software application layer, which is great. But it's thinking about how to apply security in a way that it doesn't infringe on employee experience, and getting that right. And I think the way modern technology has evolved now, the capability exists to be able to do that. And again, our role at O2 is to help enable organizations to think slightly differently and think, actually, It's like, again, going back to the transition between devices and how the whole world has evolved, right? We started, the first device that was a primitive step into the digital workplace was the BlackBerry, right? Because it was the first device that sat outside your network on a cellular network that allowed you to access your information. And it was a black and white device, and you could send and receive email and all the rest of it. And there was 450 IT policies that could lock it down to a block of cheese if you wanted to. But that was the thinking back then. And then when the smartphone came out, you had a device that had this massive screen, right? Some great real estate to be able to do things with. You had the arrival of the App Store, and all of a sudden it's like, I can do a hell of a lot more here. I can be really productive. And I think our role in this is to allow people to be productive, allow people to use these devices, allow them to actually do this. But yes, have an eye on security, but don't block it down too much. That hinders that. When you think of security, you think of mobile security, think differently, and try and future-proof from that scenario itself.
I completely agree. I mean, my two favorite acronyms at the moment are BYOD and COPE, right? Bring your own device, or corporately owned, personally enabled. And I think that second one is really interesting. A lot of the time now, employees do expect to be able to use their equipment, personally themselves. And I think actually that what you can do now with both, standard Android Enterprise, but also some of the additional stuff you can get on Knox, it's very easy actually to have, a work area and a personal area on your phone. And those two things are, absolutely separate. In the case of Knox, they are separate, in runtime as well, in real life. So it's not just when you turn your phone off, hackers can't access work data. It's, whilst you have your personal phone open, the work phone is effectively, completely secured. And that, it's actually very easy to set that up now, very easy. So if you're an IT department, you don't have to worry actually about giving, your employees access to certain apps. And of course you can have now, your own version of the App Store with fixed apps, if you want that for your business half. But on the personal side, you should be really confident, building on Android and Samsung Android, that you can give your employees, great experience and freedom without, turning it into a block of cheese.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the way that Google have rethought about the approach is really important as well. So obviously there's the copy model, or cope model, as you want to call it, corporately owned, personally enabled, which splits the device in half, and you have two different sides, personal and corporate. But I think the way that they've re-envisioned it is that let's understand who owns the data on the device and how much management can be done, because it's great giving the user the option to be able to do things in a personal space. But again, thinking about the employee, data privacy is also key. And I think Google have been really great in the way that they've reimagined that and understanding actually the data's owned by the employee here. So let's make sure that if an organization is going to manage that device, they can only manage the corporate side of it, and there's protection here from the end user. So again, it's thinking about both sides of the coin. And historically, going back 10-15 years ago, it was like, well, it's our device, so we'll manage the whole thing, and we know what you're doing, and we know where you're going and what you're looking at and all that kind of good stuff. So the balance has got to be there. Let's keep it secure, but let's not stop the user from doing what they need to do to be productive. And it's all about that engagement, right? Without people being engaged, your productivity is going to suffer, and nobody wants that from a business, because people are everyone's most important asset, never mind devices.
I think transparency around data policies is super important. I certainly think the capability now of a phone, clearly, to track your every movement, the capability is there. And of course, if you're a delivery driver, you need that, right? You need the depot to know exactly where you are at all times, to be able to communicate to the customer to say, they're going to be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 2 hours. So you do need that very minute, powerful. But at the same time, as soon as that driver takes that device, and if it's a copy device, walking through their front door, and know that then if they want to go out, they're not being tracked, and that being transparent and clearly communicated, that's super important. And I think the whole ethos of building on an open ecosystem like Android, as opposed to some of the closed ecosystems that are out there, that's the whole philosophy of openness, right? It's open and it's transparent, and actually then intrinsically is more secure than a system that you can't look into or can't fully understand. And I think that's the two different philosophies. And actually, counterintuitively to a lot of businesses, the more open and more transparent you are, the more secure it actually is.
Just going on the copy theme as well, so having a device that allows you to do both, I think one of the things that has been at the focus as well is mental well-being and wellness and digital wellness, etc. So I think one of the great features which you've incorporated on the back of the Android stuff is the ability to turn off that mode. So you've seen it where you've got the ability on a 6 o'clock on a Friday or 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, whenever you finish working. I imagine you don't. You've got the ability to just turn the work profile off, which will then just turn off your notifications, and actually you can detach for a couple of days of the weekend or when you go on holiday. You know, your phone's still there, your phone's still connected to the office. However, you're not going to get interrupted when it's your downtime to be able to, you know, replenish yourself, restore yourself, come back fresh and carry on being productive, right? Because nobody wants to have a phone which has got work and personal information on it just to be bombarded with work stuff 24/7. And I think the stuff that Google have done with the work profile and the ability to do that in order to cater for digital well-being is brilliant. And obviously you've incorporated that into your devices as well.
It's really important, right? I think, you know, the downside to the increase in productivity, you know, is increased levels of stress. It is, you know, people's mental health. It is, you know, the feeling that your own time is never really your own. And I think, you know, I think of my own personal experience. I'm working in my own home, and you know, I go downstairs and I have to switch off and come away from work mode inside my own head, and that is challenging. And you're right, having a device that, you know, backs you up on that is super important. So I personally have digital downtime, so it has certain apps turn off, you know, go to sleep. My emails are not going to be bothering me. You know, when I go down and I'm sitting with my, you know, kids over dinner, at a certain time those emails are off. That sounds basic, right? And it is basic, but it's a really important one. You know, I put a really clear do not disturb on my own phone, so that kicks in. It means that no notifications come through then in the evening.
Yeah,
for me, that's been really important.
So one of the good things that O2's done recently is launched our device as a service proposition, and again, going back to the stuff that we talked around before, you know, it's great that you can get these devices and use these devices and manage them in life using a UEM platform or an MDM platform. I think the most important thing is getting a device out of the box up and running first with minimal interruptions. So we've got a service where you can take a device, Samsung devices, for example, and set them up so when a user takes it out of the box, it's up and running. It's configured using the MDM or UEM policies, and that's it. It's great to go from the outset, meaning minimal downtime for the user. We're not having to rely on the user to go in there and start setting things up, or we're not relying on the IT department to do all the upfront configuration, taking away the complexity itself. Then also there's the protracted way of financing these devices as well over a period of time. Are you seeing quite a lot of demand for this kind of thing moving forward from your perspective as well? And any particular sectors that you're seeing it in?
I mean, it's been around for a long time, right?
Yeah.
The phrase device as a service, I think, you know, I think for too long, any device, right, any piece of equipment, any piece of hardware has been bought in bulks, put in a cupboard,
yeah,
and then brought out when needed. And it's just a really inefficient way to manage, you know, an asset, firstly, but it's also a really inefficient way to manage the services and the solutions that go around it. So the reason that I am excited about devices as a service, you know, yes, affordability is important. Yes, super predictable monthly payments is important, particularly, you know, for businesses that want to scale. But actually why I'm excited is because all of the other things that you really need to make a device work brilliantly, the service wrap, the solution wrap, the enablement on the you know, the IT stuff, all of that can be wrapped really nicely on device as a service. And so it moves the conversation from, you know, phone in a cupboard to phone into somebody's hands. And I think, you know, we're seeing, you know, yes, the short answer is yes, we're seeing demand for device as a service, because I think, you know, increasingly businesses are realizing that the device is capable of a lot more, but only if it's enabled properly, only if you enroll it properly onto your EMM solution, only if you've got a really nice service wrap that means, you know, if the phone goes wrong, it gets dropped or lost or stolen or damaged, all of that nice service is already wrapped. So for me, that's why device as a service is exciting, not just because it, is in theory a more affordable way to manage the fleet.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. It's in a world where AI and automation is key. It's taking, all it's leveraging basically all of that stuff to make things just happen, right? It just happens. It's like, best way I can describe it, because I like cars, is right. We used to drive manual cars where you had to manually change the gear and do all and now cars just change gears automatically, right? Pretty much every car from a Ford Fiesta upwards has an automatic gearbox. It just works, right? And soon cars, some are doing it now, probably going to drive themselves as well. So in that same vein, why can't a device just come out of the box, light itself up, and start working?
No, I think that's a brilliant analogy, for a different reason, and that's because hardly anyone now buys a car up front.
Yeah,
Almost
exactly.
everyone now uses PCP,
Yep.
and it's for a simple reason, because there's so much residual value now in a car that why would you pay for the whole thing when you can just pay for the depreciation effectively?
Yep.
Trade that car in at the end of the life cycle and get yourself a new one. That model works brilliantly for mobile devices, because there's so much intrinsic retained value in a handset, that it doesn't make sense for a lot of businesses to buy it outright and then buy it outright again at the end of the cycle. Much better, actually, just to pay, O2 a monthly fee, and at the end, when you trade in all those devices, it's massively reducing the total cost of ownership, and at the same time, you've got a fleet that remains, modern and up to date.
Up to date. Yeah.
Whether or not you switch the whole lot at 3 years, or whether you're switching them out continuously.
Cool. So from a futures perspective, I think there's still a lot of uncertainty around how things are going to go. I think we're at a point now where things are looking better. I think we've had a good 18 months of road testing and understanding what the art of the possible is. And I think the one thing that has come out is that there is a lot of flexibility that can be achieved with technology that's out there. And mobile can go further. And I think that's what surfaced out of this, that actually there's technology out there from a mobility perspective that can help enable a lot of things. If we think back 25 years and think if we went through this pandemic back then, what would have happened? It'd have been catastrophic. The fact that we're in a position now where actually there's technology here to enable us to do things differently, and that can help us go further, I think is a good thing. And I think the fact that organisations now understand what their options are going to help navigate whatever the future could bring.
Well, I think it's a bit of a cliche to say this, but the only thing that's certain is uncertainty. And I think, what's really important for businesses and for their employees is that they continue to build flexibility in at the core, and that they, feel comfortable to rely on the technology solutions that they've got to help support them do their jobs. That's super important. But at the same time, I think not getting in the way of their jobs, not, imposing too much on their own lives, and, remaining a sustainable solution as well. I think, that's clearly going to become, more important for the future. So using mobile and using mobile solutions in a way that helps, your business and your employees to go further, I think is, going to be incredibly important.
So listen, Adam, that's been great to get your thoughts on this session itself, and thank you very much. And hopefully we can work together in the future and help drive some more efficiencies for businesses.
It's been great. Thanks for having me.